I feel like channeling energy is its own transmission. And I think people like being in it because they like getting used to it. And at a certain point, people start either channeling for themselves or they become a bit more like that energy.
Hello, friends. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Lee Harris. Lee is a globally acclaimed energy intuitive, musician, and a channeler of a group of intelligences called the Z's, and we're going to learn a lot more about that. He leads a vibrant online community called The Portal that reaches 1 million people every month. Lee Harris is the author of a new book with Regina Meredith called The Future Human. And he's also the author of a series of 2 books that I have found tremendously engaging. It's called Conversations with the Z's. Volume 1 is on the energetics of the new human soul, and Volume 2 is Awakening Your Multidimensional Soul. Lee, welcome.
Hi, Tami. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Right at the beginning, people are meeting you here for the very first time. And one eye might be saying, what the heck's going on here? What's Tami doing talking to this guy? He's a channeler of a group of intelligences called the Z's. Who are the Z's anyway? Let's start there.
Right. So when I was 23, I was a student of self-growth and a student of metaphysics. And so I would take myself to workshops, shamanism, yoga, everything. And I was looking into everything and I was really enjoying it. And at the age of 23, I was on the underground, the subway in London, where I worked at the time, going to my then job in fundraising. And I heard this voice from the left-hand side of my head. I was in my own thoughts that morning, and a lot of the thoughts were self-judgmental, as was quite normal for me in my early 20s. And I was also, at the time, I remember I was thinking about a relationship I was in and a boyfriend I had. And we were disagreeing about something, and I was having a replay of that conversation in my head, and I was deciding that he was wrong. And all of a sudden I heard this voice and it said, "That's an interesting thought, but you're wrong. And here's why." And then they explained why it was my issue, not his. And it was one of those weird moments because at the time I remember hearing the voice, and of course you're surprised you're hearing a voice, but I was also quite taken with what they said. So what they said had an immediate effect on me. It wasn't just that psychologically what they were saying seemed sound and made sense. It was like good advice from a therapist or something. It also changed my body. So if my body was in a more constricted kind of negative state, to match the negative thoughts in the mind, I noticed that my body just kind of shifted and opened. And so I very quickly said, who are you? What are you? Because it didn't feel like any voice I'd ever heard before. I was very familiar with my own voices of my own mind. And they said, we're your guides. And we've been with you your whole life. You haven't heard us since you were 6 years old. Well, I don't remember hearing them before 6 years old. And yeah, we're your guide group. So over the years, I asked more questions. And what I came to understand is that they're a group, which threw me at the time because I'd only heard of channelers channeling one being. And they said, some of us have been incarnate as humans on Earth. Some of us have not. We are a voice of galactic source. So source as in SOURCE. Source energy I understood. And galactic was not a word I was that familiar with. So what they were saying was that we are a consciousness library. We are not just coming from the angelic realm, and we are not just coming from or what some might call the galactic or the cosmic or the alien realm. They say we have many voices within this collective, and we are here as part of your guide team as we go through this shift. Now, at that point, I never thought I would do it for work. That wasn't the thing. I just thought, oh wow, I've heard my own guides. And the biggest problem for me was that it was so simple. In my head, people who heard their guides should have probably been like a raw vegan yogi or on some kind of retreat, or they've just purified themselves. And here was I, a normal human being who was seeking self growth and healing. So I guess I was different to my peers in my teens, that I was going off to tarot readings and self growth. I clearly that world already made sense to me, even though I was having to deprogram myself from the societal conditioning that back in, the early 90s in the UK, this kind of stuff was not normal. Yet for me, it was becoming a normal part of my secret life, which was my spiritual life. So I'd had to come out as gay when I was 16. And then I came out as a channeler at some point in my 20s, and it was way harder to come out as a channeler.
As I'm talking to you here in this conversation, am I talking to Lee Harris, the person? Am I
Mm-hmm.
talking to Z, your guide, this group of guides? 88 of them, I hear, are in
Yes.
this group. That's quite
Yes.
a gaggle.
Yes.
Uh, uh, or some combination?
No, because you're asking me a question about my life experience, and particularly my life experience that day when I was 23. This was new to me on that day. So no, if you were asking me something more conceptual, or you were asking me a question about the world at large, or you were asking me a question relating to your own specific life and path, at that point, I would probably be a hybrid of some of the Z's information and some of my own senses as an intuitive. It's almost like turning a flashlight on. So I did one-on-one sessions for 15 years, for example. And how that would go is you would come to my session. I would know whatever name you had given me. And I would normally speak to you for 25 minutes before you asked me any question. Now, that wasn't the Z's necessarily. That was me, the human intuitive, going into the mode of turn the flashlight on Tami and tell Tami what you are hearing about her life, her soul, her path, her destiny. And that would usually result in like a 25-minute monologue from me, basically. So there are two ways I work. When I'm channeling the Z's, I will close my eyes and I will let them come through me. And their language and their cadence is slightly different to my own. And if it's me as an intuitive, I would sound very much like I sound right now. And I would seem the more grounded version of myself than when I'm closed eyed and channeling. But I open up a kind of dimension of seeing that I can kind of close or open. At this point, I can close or open it. I can, if I'm in the grocery store, I don't tend to turn that on. But sometimes in the grocery store, that can be handy.
I was thinking about how people who might be listening to this and have whatever judgments they might be bringing to the notion of quote unquote channeling, and what are they going to make of this conversation? And what I thought to myself was, once people have their own direct experience it's interesting when you talked about being on the subway and feeling the shape of your felt sense
Mm.
shifting. You felt really different and you heard a voice. And once you have that yourself, you're open. You want to know what's going on because you have your own inner reference point for it. If you've never had that, it's a lot harder. And one of the things I discovered is that you actually teach people how to open up to greater levels of intuition and even channeling. And I thought we could actually start our conversation learning more about that for the person who's like, I want to have a direct experience of guides coming through me. I really want that.
I love that you bring up the skepticism piece versus the experience piece, because I think I get asked that a lot. Sometimes people will say, how do I convince my skeptical husband? And I'm like, I never advise trying to convince anybody who's skeptical, because they're reporting their true experience. And it is true. It takes an experience for that to shift. Regarding the teaching of channeling, there are a couple of things that I do. the first thing is not really a teaching at all. It's more an explanation of what I think is happening. When I first started channeling, I was quite quickly taken into the channeling world, which was a side of self development that I didn't know existed. I didn't know there was a world where channeling conferences happened and that people want to go and sit and listen to channels all day. That was not the world I was a student of, so I didn't know. And I noticed in those rooms that people, of course, go there for information or the vibrational shift. But over the years, I started to realize, oh, this is interesting. Channeling is kind of an initiation energy. I think some people think they're listening to a channeled being because maybe, or hopefully, the being has information that has a higher perspective or a useful perspective that's going to help you expand, become more spiritual in your outlook, understand your life more. And all of that is true. But there's a more hidden aspect, I think, which is when you resonate with channeled energy, it is some part of you, your own higher self, your own intuition. Potentially, you may end up channeling your own guides. That's not always the case for everybody. But I feel like channeling energy is its own transmission. And I think people like being in it because they like getting used to it. And at a certain point, people start either channeling for themselves or they become a bit more like that energy. Much like for myself as a channeler, of course, 26 years later, I'm very influenced by what the Z's have told me, what has come through my body. I'm still the evolution of who I was as a human being 26 years ago, but very influenced by their perspective. So I think the first piece with teaching channeling is the osmosis effect of being in the room when that kind of energy is happening and seeing if it affects you and your body. The second thing that I advise people to do is to practice what some refer to as automatic writing. You know, I know that Julia Cameron, someone told me once, oh, this is like Julia Cameron's morning pages, which is a stream of consciousness in the morning where you let things flow through you. So I always encourage people to sit quietly for a minute or get yourself comfortable, sit quietly with a pen and paper or with a sheet of a document on your tablet, your screen, if you prefer typing, and ask yourself a question. So, for example, the question might be, I always say a good question to start with is, soul, how am I doing today? So you direct the question to your soul or your higher self. Some people might prefer the terminology God. Some people might prefer to say guides, how am I doing? But you just ask a general opening question to see, how am I doing? And the question invites an answer. And that's how a lot of channeling works. I think people forget that channeling is a very participatory act. Unless you are a trance channel, and there are less of those these days because we are more capable of interacting with this level of consciousness from where we stand today. Whereas if you go back in time, this is what my guides have said, trance channeling was a bit more necessary to move people out of their regular dense frequency to a higher frequency, which is channeling. These days, we're getting a little more acclimatized to it. So back to the question. You ask your question and then sit and see if you receive any words. And don't worry if you think you're making it up. Try not to judge the words as you hear them or receive them. Just write them down and think of yourself as a receptionist or a telephonist who is taking notes and dictation. All you want to do is let the words fall onto the page or onto the document that you're typing onto. You can read the words when the stream has stopped. So let's say you get 3 paragraphs. The trick is just keep writing, keep writing. Don't stop and listen. Don't stop and reflect. Keep writing. When it feels like it's complete, then sit back and read what you have written. So it's a twofold process. We're listening to receive, and then we are reflecting on what we have received. And that's very powerful for us. It starts to transform us inside to read words that have come to us through us that are higher guidance. So to boil that down even more simply, I guess, I always say that we can all be a wise voice for a friend or a loved one in our life. We can bypass ourselves. We can look at their situation and we can go, let me see if this piece of advice can help you, or maybe you just need someone to empathize with you, or whatever it is. We have that within us for ourselves too. We just haven't all been encouraged to tap into it. And I do think that we and future generations, this will just become more normal. I don't think people will be so separate from their own connection to whatever they experience spirit as.
One of the things I read in conversations with Z's that got my attention was that it's powerful for us to actually ask our guides, higher dimensions, for help, particularly at this time, that there are a lot of energies, intelligences that want to help human beings for all kinds of reasons in terms of what's happening in our collective evolution. But there's this requirement that we ask, that we say, hey, I need your help. And I wonder if you can say more about this, because this is something, people are always like, what can I do? The world seems like such a mess. And
Mm.
this may be outside of some people's frame, but it might be worth a try.
Yeah. And I think for those people who are feeling empathic pain about the world, creating a blessing for the world or a prayer for the world, lighting a candle for the world, being intentional for the world can be a way of taking that energy of despair and focusing and inviting something healing and peaceful for the world at large. But it will also be good for you and your energy field, not to bypass your pain, because you need to feel it. And if you're having pain or you're having a release, you need to let it move through you, but you don't want to get stuck there. So, just to your point, that's the person who's feeling that about the world at large. But yeah, they have said that angels are there to help us all the time, and we forget to ask. And I remember them saying that almost 20 years ago, and I was struck by it. But then I would notice time and time again how we don't ask. I would have people ask me questions that they wanted me to answer, that they could have actually, if they had chosen to, they could have asked that for themselves, or they could have called something in. And I also caught myself doing the exact same thing, even as a channeler, even as someone, the human amnesia is quite hardwired in us if we weren't raised in either a culture that invited us into what I would call true spirituality, which for me, true spirituality is where your primary relationship is with love, wisdom, peace. It's not necessarily using your spirituality or your religion, because we can see shadow areas in both spiritual groups and religious groups to justify hatred, division, to justify separation between humans, to decide one group is better than another. That to me is not true spirituality. That's a different thing. That's people playing at a different level under the guise of, well, this will justify these lower vibration thoughts and feelings that I'm having towards other people, because I put it under the name of spirituality. These are my spiritual beliefs or my religious beliefs. And I think for a long time, people have been able to perhaps hide behind that, because we were all told, well, this is the route to God or to spirit. And that is beginning to break down as more people are having outside the box experiences, or they are beginning to consider, well, maybe I can have a conversation with God myself. Whereas I know some of my friends were raised religious and they were told, don't bother God. You don't get to speak to God directly. You have to go through the priest. And then other friends were raised religious in a very different way, and it was more free and more connected. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting area.
Can you say anything more specifically? Someone's like, okay, this sounds a little bit like I'm going into quote unquote prayer in some way. I'm
Yes.
asking for
I
help.
can, I can,
How
I
do
can
I
give
do
you
this in a
very,
way? Yeah,
very,
that also takes responsibility for my life and my actions. And yeah.
yeah. I have a friend, uh, someone I'm very close to right now, who is currently in a part of the world working on spiritual ceremonies with indigenous peoples who are, this is their world. And he just messaged me and said he was really tired and it's very intense. It's powerful, but it's very intense. And I just reminded him, I said, don't forget to ask for help. Don't forget to say to your angels, please help me integrate this. Please let me sleep tonight. It can be that simple. We might be distressed about, oh God, I'm not sleeping. What's wrong with me? What's going on? I'm so anxious. And I'm not saying that one sentence at night is going to solve it the first night. But if every night before you go to sleep, you were to say, angels, please help me rest tonight. Please let me sleep. Please be with me tomorrow. Please bring me grace, peace. Now, I'm giving you example words based on a generic question, but whoever wants to ask their angels for help, trust that you know what words to use. You know what words to use for yourself. And you're essentially inviting universal energy to collaborate with you at a higher level. Meaning, I could stay stuck in my fear and my upset. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we stay in our depression or our grief sometimes longer than we really need to, or we get stuck there because we get habituated to it. And what can start to bring you out of it is verbally from your own body creating a command into the air, into the atmosphere that is saying, I'd like this to go in a different direction. We forget the power of our words, and the Z's have said that a lot. And so we forget that we are allowed to command with our words. So much like our actions give us experiences in the world, if we choose to drive to visit a friend, we're going to have a certain experience than if we choose to stay home. They say that we forget to collaborate with our words in that way too. And for those of you who prefer silence and you don't wish to verbalize out loud, it's very powerful to sit there quietly and from inside your mind just, reflect, oh, I'm a bit tired today, or I'm a bit agitated, or I tried breath work and it didn't work, but I need some support. Angels, please help me open my heart today. Please help me feel and find and bring peace today. An affirmation of intent. It's a focuser, not just for your mind, but you also tell the universe, I'm willing to collaborate here, and these are the frequencies I'm looking to collaborate on.
We've talked about the Z's as these 88, I'm going to call them intelligences. I'm not sure if you would use
Yep.
that word, that are existing in a different dimension. And one of the things they describe about dimensionality is to think about it as a vertical dimension. So it's not necessarily higher, but it's simultaneous to.
Mm.
Okay, so what is their purpose, if you will, or agenda? Here you are, you're their human spokesperson, representative. What are they up to?
I think, I would almost say it's the reverse. I don't think I'm their human spokesperson. I think I'm the spokesperson for the people who listen to them. Actually, I know that sounds almost like the same thing, but I actually think it's the reverse. Like they have said to me, if I ever chose to stop publicly channeling, that would be fine. They would stay with me. So it's funny. People often are, they're like, why are they here? Why are they helping? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we're all part of the same universe. So what goes on Earth has a universal effect. So there are many groups and beings aside from the Z's who are here at this time in history to try and help transition Earth from where we are into a higher consciousness. Just as there are people in human form on the planet who want to drag us backwards, there are also beings who may have the same agenda. So I think it's interesting to me how, let me put it this way. It's interesting to me that one of the questions that people always want to know about the Z's or any channeled entity is, well, how do we know we can trust them? And I'm always thinking, well, number one, they're not telling you what to do. They're not telling you must do. And if they did, I wouldn't channel them. But also, isn't it interesting that we will ask that question of spirit that we have been taught to be skeptical of, and we are still not very well informed as a society around who we should be suspicious of in life on a human level, who could bring us harm. So I always find it interesting that people like to separate those two. They like to, and I think it comes from maybe religion and this idea that, and still to this day, there will be people who say, oh, it's a demon. Or if you're channeling and it's not going through a priest, then it's a demon. And that's what they've been trained to believe. So I think there is this kind of, well, what's their agenda? I think that's a bigger question, meaning, what's our agenda? Why are we here? And actually, what they have talked about is that we all coexist, and that their role and why they are doing this is because we will all, when we pass over, potentially go into that kind of role if we want to. If we don't reincarnate, we will all go into a role of consciousness in the lives of either someone that we're still connected to on the planet, or they've even said that some people, when they leave the body, they will come back as energy movers. So they won't work with humanity directly, but they will energetically come back to parts of the planet or perhaps other realms in the universe as well, where they will move and balance energy. So I think it's more that my sense of it is more that the soul always has a job, and this is theirs. And just because their soul is not in the human body right now, it doesn't mean they don't have a relationship with us and where we're going. That's the best way I can explain it, I think, Tami. I hope that was clear.
What's your job, you, Lee?
My job right now is to do exactly what I'm doing, and I suspect that's my job for at least the next 5 years.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a big general question, and it's the kind of thing I think you could talk about for many, many hours, but you can just give me the pith response. How do you see, from all the work you've done with disease, this time we're in as a human species? This is my big general, oh my God, this time we're recording this conversation end of 2025.
Things that groups of us have known about or been privy to or heard about for the last 30, 40, 50 years are now happening right in front of our faces. So to me, this is kind of a crunch time, meaning this is it. Like, this is the moment where things start to transform. I'm often, it's weird. I just got that image of the movie Titanic, where at the end, the boat kind of snaps in half and everything goes the other way. I feel like that's where we're at right now. I feel that we've gone through this period over about the last 10, 13 years, like 2012 onwards. We've started to see what we knew as the 3D world transform. And I feel like we're right now at the beginning of the next massive transformation. I think we're going to see transformation in the next 10, 20 years that could match what our parents' generation saw in their whole lifetime.
And if a listener says, well, my intent is to align as much as possible with benevolent impacts, how do I do that, Lee, from your perspective?
Work on love. Work on love. So identify what love feels like to you in your body. For some people, love feels like purpose. For some people, love feels warm and fuzzy and giving things to people. And for some people, it's different for everyone. But aligning with purposeful either work, or perhaps it's not your career, but it's work that you do as service or with your community, that kind of makes your heart light up. Because usually your heart will be lighting up because you're lighting up other hearts at the same time. And you're in resonance with hearts you're lighting. And equally in your personal life, look for love and look to keep moving toward love and away from judgment, division, which for all of us requires and involves shedding behaviors that we all used to see as normal based on our conditioning, that we then outgrow and go, oh, wow, that's a bit judgmental. I had no idea, but I was trained into it. Now I know what my heart feels like. I can recognize when I say that thing about this person, ooh, that didn't feel good. Because I've opened my heart to love enough that I recognize there isn't enough love in that sentence I just said. Oh, time for me to stop saying what I learned from my family or the business place I've been in for 10 years. Who do I want to be? And I would say love and heart energy. The Z's have said heart energy is going to be one of the main currencies on the earth in the coming decades. So heart energy to me always makes me think, yeah, where do we feel love? Where do we feel we have given love, received love? Where do we feel love inside us for what we are doing, what we are living? Can we keep going in that direction as much as possible on any given day?
What do you mean by currencies, one of the main currencies?
Yeah, good question. They said heart energy is going to be one of the most important things on the planet in the coming decades, meaning it will be who is using their heart intelligence, not their mental or egoic intelligence in isolation from their heart. So the way I can look at that is the good of the all being considered? Is what it is that you want to do? Does it have a positive ripple effect in the world? Or is it something you want to do to feed yourself, just you and your family, just your ego, whatever need you have to be seen a certain way? These are all fairly old paradigm identities that are fading out. Overall, they're fading out. There will still be some people who will embody them a lot. And then there will be others who have no interest in that kind of story of being on earth anymore. And they will move more to a heart space, which is my heart feeling like we are good? Is my heart feeling like my world is good? It's a, I'm trying to think, how can I explain it less abstractly for someone who doesn't really understand what I'm talking about? Again, it is as simple as, and yet this is challenging to be vigilant about if you aren't a growth oriented or minded person. It is as simple as asking yourself, how did I feel today on a scale of 1 to 10 overall throughout my day? I give myself a 2. I was really stressed this morning. Then I was agitated at lunchtime. Then there was too much work in the afternoon. And then my sister really annoyed me when she phoned me at 6. Yeah, today wasn't a good day. This was a 2 out of 10. Okay, how tomorrow do I make it a 6 out of 10? Well, I have to identify what the stresses were. So you can say, angels, please let me have a better day tomorrow. And that's one way of creating a different energy in your life. But you'll also have to go, oh, yeah, my sister, I probably shouldn't take her call tomorrow if she calls me again. Or I need to have a clear conversation with her about we need to learn to communicate differently because this isn't working for me. The work I'm doing is sapping my soul. I might need to think that over the next 6 to 12 months, I need to take action around that. So I think uncovering the heart actually takes work. It's not just, oh, good, I felt really good for 10 minutes. I found my heart. I think it's also identifying where and when we get further away from our heart. So I know for me, it would be overwhelm or stress. So then I'll look at, okay, I need to calm the schedule down. I spoke to too many people today. How am I going to change that tomorrow? So it's always kind of fine tuning through your own evolution process.
You know, it's interesting to me, this notion on liberating, I would say, our heart energy to flow in an unobstructed way. That's the way I'll put it from my own experience. And it's interesting. I feel like I'm right on time in a certain way, which I'm grateful for. I don't say that arrogantly. I hope it doesn't sound that way. It's more like I've been suffering, and this is apparent that this is the next evolutionary phase that wants to happen, which is to find in my own inner awareness pockets of heart energy that are occluded, like somehow little areas that are like, no, we're not going to be part of the big heart opening agenda, Tami. No way. It's going to hurt too much. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. No. And they're like hiding out a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you might say to that for other people who are on this work on love project. They get it. That's what this time's about, but have pockets of like, it hurt
Yeah.
too much.
It's, by the way, that's normal. And I think it's so interesting because Tammy, it's brilliant talking to you. Firstly, because of what you've done for so long in the field. You know, you've been doing this for 30 years and you've built an organization that serves consciousness. You know, I've been a student of self-growth and spirituality consciously since I was 16 and I'm 49 now. And I've been working in it for 21 years. I, I resonate with what you just said because I think back to what I thought about spirituality and self-growth 25, 30 years ago, and it seems so basic now, but it's where not only I was, it's where the world was. And I think we've all changed. And so I think if you are a student of self-growth and spirituality for a long time, there can be this sometimes illusionary idea that, oh, well, I'm just going to be enlightened for the last 30 years of my life and everything's going to be peaceful and easy. And actually, if you are here as an energy mover or as an energy worker or a light worker or a grid worker, whatever label you do or don't identify with, the path is usually one of constant change and transformation. Because if you're here to be here for the ride of transformation on earth, lo and behold, you're going to have to be a few steps ahead of it. But also, there comes a point in our life where we can deal with something. At the age of 67, we are suddenly capable of dealing with that 17-year-old trauma that we did not have the wherewithal to deal with before 67. It took us all those years to get to a place of resource, energy alignment, blessings in our life, learnings in our life, tough challenges in our life to go, oh, I can now handle what happened when I was 17. And so the body goes, great. I'm just going to bring back some memories to kind of stir the pot, because you do need to know that this is what's leaving you. So I want you to be a little aware of it mentally. And I know for me, one of my biggest challenges that I had to undo for myself coming out of the self growth world was self judgment. I went into the self growth world with a lot of self judgment, and I came out with almost just as much. Because in some of the workshops I was going to, and they were brilliant workshops, but as was the way back then, there was a lot of talk of, well, if you're not getting over this, if you're not healing, what's your resistance? What are you not looking at? It was kind of tough. And there's a value in that. There is a value in going, oh, yeah, have I got some resistance? But it should only be a consideration. It shouldn't be a rule, because sometimes you consider it and you go, no, I haven't got resistance. It's just not the right time. It's just not the right alignment. And that's what the Z's taught me. They trained me to recognize when I was being judgmental on myself and my own process. They trained me to understand that it's okay that sometimes we're confused about what we're going through. It's okay that sometimes we think, wow, why is this coming back up from 30 years ago? They will say, good, celebrate it. Don't see it as a problem. The fact that you're aware that it's there and the fact that you have enough space in you to hold space for it, that's very different to if it would have hit me 30 years ago when I'd have just been in it. So, for example, 30 years ago, my anxiety would have looked like, oh my God, Tami, what am I going to do? Tami, I've just had this thing fall through. And Tami, I don't know what, Tami. I'd have been on the phone to you like a mess. And that was all I knew. Now I can feel, ooh, I feel a bit wobbly. Maybe I should call Tami. Well, hang on, let's just breathe. Okay, we've got some anxiety. Now I can be a little more cognizant of all the different things going on inside me and hold a wider space of observer. And that observer can then help parent me through what I couldn't parent myself through when I was younger. And in my case, I turned it into a sugar addiction very young in life and went through bulimia and all kinds of stuff in my teenage years with how I dealt with my sensitivity. And I think that's why this is such an important time for us to explore our sensitivity. Sometimes people go, oh, I need to become more sensitive. And I'm like, maybe, maybe not. Explore your sensitivity. Let's see who you're supposed to be, because everyone is unique and everyone is different. And one of the hardest things, I think, in any conversation like this is when you are trying to explain something to someone who maybe hasn't experienced it before, it's very tempting to fall into the trap of giving people generic answers that are going to make somebody think they're not doing it right because it won't be right for that person. So I'm always a little mindful of that when we try and pull this stuff apart. But I would say the fundamental issue is, to anyone listening or watching, do you feel like you know who you are? And if your answer is, yeah, I feel like I'm discovering who I am, or I feel like I do, or I feel like there's more, but cool, great, that's good. If your answer is, I have no idea who I am, then we know that there is or I should say, there are a series of parts of you that, for whatever reason, have not yet been able to come forward. And that's why you're in your discovery phase. Most of us become seekers, either because the pain we're feeling is so great that it makes us have to turn somewhere to try and find something else, or because we know there's another dimension of reality that no one else is talking about, and we're going to go and find it. Now, I'm speaking as someone with our history, Tami, but I think these days you can go to the internet and find so much. But 30, 40 years ago, you had to go and seek out the spiritual bookstore or it was a different quest back in the day.
Now, Lee, I'm going to ask my question in a slightly different way, if that's
Okay.
okay, because part of what got my attention is in your new book with Regina Meredith on the future human. She says in the introduction, spoiler alert, the future human will have this capacity. This is sort of like, let me just tell it to you before you even read the book. Our minds begin to work through our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's great. What a great kind of that's the kind of future human I not only want to evolve into, but want to be around. This heart beaming, big heart energy space
Yeah.
from others, shared with others. And what I've recognized in my own journey is that I still feel these, I'm just going to describe them as like holdback places from future human liberated heart power. And I've been inquiring into what are these holdback places? Like, what is it? And it's like, oh, you're going to get hurt, Tami. You're going to get slammed. This is going to be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just keep it back, keep it
Mm-hmm.
down. And this is what I would love for you to address as like, what do we
Got it.
do to open that up?
Well, okay, I'll give you a very personal example because it's very fresh for me. So I met my beloved very recently, like 2.5 months ago. And it's been very powerful, very beautiful. And at the same time, what came in because of that was realizing that I could lose him, realizing that he could die. My mind decided to give me a whole host of scenarios. And so what I did over the course of the few days as these images were coming in was I sat with the feelings, but I also approached each problem my mind was giving me or each fear the way I would with any friend. And I was able to sit with, okay, yeah, there is a risk. There is a great risk here. If you knew that he was going to die in a year, would you not fall in love with him and be with him? And there was just no question. I was like, no, absolutely, I would be with him. There's no even if I knew that that was coming in a year, there's no question I'm walking away now. So what I recognized was, okay, I'm in this. So clearly, this is another layer of fear because there's another level of love. So what I recognize, because I'm 10 years on from who I was at the beginning of my last relationship, which was 8 years long, I'm a different person. I'm a different frequency. I'm more open. I've met someone who's a match for that. And so now comes up some of the basement. And as I move into this expanded love space, my soul, my human personality wants to show me, Lee, now let's look at this fear that you're now going to have in your life as part of the deal. If you love this person this much, there's now someone who you're going to be concerned about when they're off in, places. For example, he's on a big trip at the moment in fairly out there places in the world. So I guess that's a very human example of my process. And at this stage of my life, when that stuff happens to me, I go, okay, there's some stuff here that needs to be felt. It wants to be seen. The fear wants to protect me. The fear doesn't want me to get hurt. So what I did was I went, okay, can you live with the fact that if this relationship or his life ended prematurely, would you survive? Would you be okay? Because I had one relationship that almost killed me when it ended like 15 years ago. So it was interesting. So that's kind of par for the course. As we open up, we do have to deal with some of the places in our history where perhaps we stopped love always stop to the heart. Very important not to judge yourself in the past or in the now, because the other thing, Tami, to take into account, because I love that you're sharing that from your own experience, which is you're catching these parts of yourself that you're recognizing are still a bit closed. You have to remember that you're perfect for all the people in your life, including the people you work with, and for including the people who listen to this podcast. So where you're at right now in your personal development is actually not just about you. It's about your beloved. It's about your friends and family. It's about the people you serve in your workplace, in your community. Where you're holding yourself energetically is correct. I had an experience where I was in Boulder, and there was a lot. When I was in Boulder, I experienced a lot of um, extraterrestrial activity in the area I was living, and it was subtle, but it was very present. And one day I was offered the opportunity to meet one.
Oh
Um,
my, you're going to definitely have to tell me more about this.
it was telepathic. I was in North Boulder, where I was living near Wonderland Lake, and there was a lot going on at Wonderland Lake back then. I'll say that much. And I was literally in my apartment one night, and I literally heard through the facilitation of disease, because I have that telepathic bridge. Would you like to have a first contact experience? And it was very interesting. It was a soul voice that came through me. It wasn't a human voice, because you would think I would have been more. And the soul voice said, no, because if I have that experience, it will change who I am so dramatically that I will not be able to continue doing what I'm here to do as a soul. This is not the time for me to have that experience. Now, I think I could have that experience probably now and kind of integrate it enough, but it would have taken me off my path. And what I understood from that moment was, oh, there are choices. And with every choice we make, if we choose to open that door, it will change so many elements of our world that it may not be appropriate. There might be a reason that we are supposed to be fixed in place with what we perceive as an issue. And the Z's spoke about this. I do a soul magic retreat for 6 days every summer, usually. And one of the channels in this year's soul magic, they talked about how we judge ourselves for what we perceive as our flaw, or we think, oh, I'm not very good at this, I'm good at this, and but if only I was a bit better at that. And they say, you have no idea how that is holding you in place. That thing that you perceive as your problem, your wrinkle, your crease, they say that is giving balance to all the other things on the left. So you think that's a problem, but actually that is actually holding you in place. And so they were just really encouraging us to have a much lighter touch around our personal judgment of our own assessment of how open we are or aren't or should be or shouldn't. They said the more you can come from a place of curiosity and exploration, the more a lot of that competitive with self agenda that most of us have been trained into will start to dissipate and dissolve.
Very helpful. When I first started doing a little research into who is this Lee Harris guy anyway, I ran into a video of one of your energy updates. And it was the energy update here for December in 2025. And I have to say, my jaw fell out of my mouth and onto the floor during the first 10 minutes in a positive way, in that I felt so reflected in the energy update you were giving. And you were describing this time as one of an elevation in frequency. And I know these are general, broad uh, language, but it worked for me when I could feel it, this elevation, and also this sense that many people listening may have come through a really difficult period where they felt the old the old constructions were being disassembled in some way. And I was like, wow, whatever intelligences Lee Harris is bringing through right now, they're reflecting the journey I feel like I've been on and have now come through in a new place of feeling this different elevated energy. And I thought to myself, what I want to hear from Lee is for people who are hearing that are like, wow, I'm still in the disassemblage
Hmm.
phase. I'm not feeling this positive, elevated uplift of
Hmm.
potential and power for the next few years. I'm still feeling crushed in some way. If you could address their situation and help.
Yeah. Well, firstly, and when I do the energy updates, there are always 8 themes, and so my hope, although it's kind of out of my hands because it's intuited, so I never fully understand how it is or isn't landing for people. My hope is that people might identify with at least a few of the themes, but there will be some, of course, they won't find themselves in, and you have to speak quite broadly. But at the same time, I try and be as specific as I can. My feeling and my experience, both having gone through some major dark night of the soul transformations myself that lasted quite a long time, not just a month or two, but a year or 2 or 3, um, and having witnessed other people do that, I feel like the size of the depth plunge, how far you go down and for how long you go down, can be paralleled by where it might come up when it starts going the other way. And that's always a good thing to remember, particularly if you're really sick of being in a tough place, which I think most of us get to. I know for myself, when I've been depressed or down or really struggling, it's very hard. The worst thing that someone can say to you is think positive, because you don't feel positive and you certainly don't want to think positive. If anything, what I learned through that process, because I used to fight that a lot, was the more I surrendered to it and the more I didn't try and judge myself for what I was feeling, but allowed myself to feel and move through what I was needing to feel, the sooner and the smoother it would start to go. So I think for anyone who, what I would say is, if that is your truth, so your question, Tammy, if someone was in that really tough place and they weren't feeling positive, make 2026 the year of you. Now, the single parent who is overworked just heard that and went, how the hell do I make it the year of me when I'm, and I get it, but by your standards, make it the year of you. So it might not mean that you have the luxury of thinking about yourself all week. Very few people do, but you have to start including that, because our life is something that we can reconstruct. And sometimes we're capable of making big changes, and sometimes our circumstances mean we can only make small changes. So, for example, the times I lived in very small apartments, but I didn't have a yard or anything, I learned that I had to go to the park. And if I took myself to the park, I got my nature fix, my nervous system reset. And if I didn't, then I wouldn't experience what I needed to experience. So there are always small things that we can do to bring to ourselves what we need. And so I think if you have been suffering and struggling for a long time, I'm always a big advocate of, what support do I need to bring in next? Because you never want to suffer alone for too long. The longer we're in isolation, the more it starts to turn on you. That's what, there was a quote from the Z's many years ago where they said, isolation is healing until it becomes the enemy. At a certain point, the isolation that once healed you, you might not notice. You might get habituated to staying away from everybody for a year. And in year 2, it was time to start going out a bit more. But you got so habituated and you got so scared, you kind of felt like you forgot how to socialize. You just didn't take yourself back out. And you do it gently. Go to one social thing every 2 weeks and then adjust. So I think if you really feel that low, you have to make yourself the priority next year. And that will include throwing whatever support you can find at the problem. If you're feeling depressed a lot, are you finding helpful videos or articles on depression? Do you have friends in your midst who've been through it? Talk to them, get support. Are you capable of finding a mentor? Maybe you have the money to be able to hire a mentor or a therapist or a healer. So there are lots of different ways we can tackle it, but know that it is not normal. Know that the state that you are in is not normal and it is not supposed to be your future. Now, if you're someone who lives with chemical imbalances, or you recognize depression is a part of you and it might be cyclical in your life, then this is the time, if you haven't already, to develop tools that can help you when you're in one of those cycles. And that's also you making 2026 the year of you.
Now, I asked you how the Z's work through you, and you said that one possibility when you're really having them speak through you is that you shut your eyes
Mhm.
and your voice sounds different. And you know where I'm going here, Lee.
Yes, I just worked that out, Tammy. No problem. Let me
How do you feel about that?
absolutely fine. Let me
You
just
don't
grab
feel I'm over asking here?
Tami Simon. I'm on your podcast. You can't over ask.
Okay.
It's an honor to be with you. So I would love to see what they have to say with you and to you.
And really, it's on behalf of our audience too. All the people who are listening will listen to this. What message the Z's have for how, and really, it's about being aligned forces of good and service in the world. That's what I want to hear what they have to say.
Perfect. And they usually say something and then they'll ask you for questions. So we'll see how it goes. But that's the usual thing. Good. Welcome. A pleasure to be with you. We will speak first to you, Tammy. Then we will speak to your audience, for want of a better term. We will say your community. Tammy, you have always had a fast mind. It is part of your brilliance, and your mind is somewhat cosmic in its intelligence. It is why you have always wanted to look into the broader topics, but to find the detail and the specifics within those broader topics to help distill and bring this wisdom to others. So you are we will call it, a fan of wisdom. You are a distributor of wisdom. You are in service to wisdom. And you yourself are entering what will be the best period of your life, which is the next 20 to 30 years for you. There will be much that will bloom in your life and in the world at large, which you will greatly enjoy. So, to your community, part of the gathering here is similar. On Earth, whenever there is a figurehead for a movement or a teaching or a way of being, those who follow the figurehead are usually in two camps. They are either aligned with the figurehead and already identify with much of what the figurehead stands for, or they are seeking more of what the figurehead is offering. So, in your community, Tammy, there are at least 35% of your listeners who very much resonate with your, we will call it, cosmic and fast intelligence, which you are now bringing down into your body. In many ways, Tammy, your role in this life was to shake up what we will call the academia imprint, meaning you could and have in many lives been what we would call a fine academic on earth. So in this lifetime, you decided to be one of the bridges for those with a highly curated academic mind, to allow them to come back to the realm of the senses, the higher mind, and the divine intelligence that moves down through the mind, the third eye, and the throat to the heart, where it all centers for the coming generations. So, to your last question to Lee about how people who are struggling right now might find themselves, we will say the biggest key for all of you is to find the new. Find the new. Why? So much in your world is necessarily changing. It is becoming outdated, outgrown, and in many cases, it is shaking in its system. So there are systems on Earth that you have all been in for hundreds of years that are beginning to rapidly change. Why we say to you, look for the new in your own life, is if you are dealing with too much death energy, which equates to loss, change, transformation from recognizable circumstances and relationships into unrecognizable circumstances and relationships.
If you are dealing with too much death and loss energy without enough new birth energy coming in, the balance starts to get heavy. So, any of you who are struggling and have been for quite some time, what new thing, person, doing, feeling would you like to bring into your life? And allow yourself to let that new in. And notice if when we ask you to bring in something new, you get agitated, defensive, against this idea. Notice that part of you and ask that part of you, why so afraid of the new? What do you think you can't handle in the future? What do you think you are not equipped for in the future? And what we will tell you, many of you, is the levels of love that you so often crave and say you crave and look for and want and speak about and write songs about, you actually fear. Because there is a level of ego death that occurs in love. And you have to remember that on your planet, many humans are constantly trying to reassure each other about their human ego. And that's the game that's being played. We're not saying all are, and most of you will not be, shall we say, spending time with those people as much as you are with those who are at least looking for peace or love to be a part of their daily reality and what they bring to the world. So, love is the thing you all seek. And understandably, the enormous power of love and its ability to dissolve all previous wounds, contracts, if allowed to fully blast through the energy field of a human, it will change you in ways that you aren't always ready for. So, this is why, as Lee alluded to, we are always telling you all to be kind to yourself about your own progress. You may perceive that you are not where you should be, but we would say if that's where you find yourself in the present moment, that's exactly where you should be. Perhaps the reason you are having these thoughts is because it is going to lead you down a path of reflecting on recent behaviors, choices that got you to this point, so that you can learn from them for the future and not make those same choices again. Good. Now we will ask you if you have any questions for us.
Well, I found that profound. So, first, thank you. And what I notice is that the love that is most alive in my heart is an expression of service. And I notice I feel a little shy saying that. Like, really? You could talk to this great, powerful 88-person intelligence about anything, and this is what you want to bring forward? But it's the core energy that lives inside of me. And the people who are tracking, who are still listening right now to you and me, I'm going to believe they care about this. So let's end our conversation, and thank you, oh, Force of Z's, with your advice, recommendations, pointers on the expression of pure service at this time.
Well, firstly, we will point out that there is no need to see us as some great intelligence greater than your own. This is also the paradigm that is going to change on Earth in the coming decades. There is going to be more of a fusion and more of an understanding that there are, shall we say, thinning veils all over the planet when it comes to interdimensional communication. And that is what you are experiencing right now. But you are experiencing it because you are capable of creating it and opening up to it. That is the power of humanity. And the reason that you speak of service and the reason that you enjoy serving love is because love is an energy field that is not solely in your body. When you connect to love, you are never just connecting to yourself. Even if you are doing it from a meditation that is purely focused on you and your well being, your nervous system, love is a frequency field. It's an energy field that exists on the planet. And when you walk back into it with another person, you start to amplify it and re-illuminate it. So to be in service to love is of the highest order. For on this planet at this time, love is the force that is most needed. And yes, there are many loving humans on Earth, but there are also those with agendas who would rather see love left behind. And instead, they prefer control, hierarchy, what we would call the old ways of Earth. And there are those who have been, we will say, cast at this time to rise and be the figureheads for the opposite of love. as you in society go through this transformation. So, to your question, to serve love in your own life will see you automatically serving love in the world. If you were to give some focus every day to something you love, you will start to feel the frequency of love more often. And as you feel the frequency of love more often, you will naturally be a more benevolent sharing force of love. Think of the day where you are not so good in yourself. You are a little down, you are a little upset, and somebody is loving toward you, kind toward you, smiles at you, gives you a gift, does something nice. A little lift in your energy field. See how love is handed on? See how love is a shared energy, and sometimes you are too tired to give it, so instead you open and allow yourself to receive it. Love is a flowing force, and it is a building force. So, the reason those of you who are here for service and here for opening your hearts and here for love are perhaps a little afraid of love is because you have no idea how big it can get. You have no idea how the more you are willing to evaporate the old construct of what you thought reality was, and the more you are willing to allow in the new construct of your reality, which is a reality and a life that is rooted more deeply in love, then you are not only creating a different world for yourself, you are contributing toward an entirely different, we will call it frequency midpoint on Earth. At the moment, the frequency midpoint on Earth is not love. If you take the average of all the frequencies on Earth right now, unfortunately, you are a little tipped into fear as a society. And that is being perpetrated, by the way. That is being created very deliberately by certain powers that be that would like to see you remain in the power of fear. Because in the power of fear, you are more powerless. In the power of love, you become more powerful.
This is a good place for us to end what I'm going to call part 1 of my conversation with Lee Harris here on Insights at the Edge and our connection with the Z's. I look forward to talking with you again sometime in the future, Lee. I've enjoyed it so much. There's something about what you're bringing through that feels pure, helpful, and deeply inspiring to me. So thank you so very, very much. Lee Harris, author of the new book, The Future Human, and 2 volumes called Conversations with the Z's. You can visit him online at his community called The Portal. Thank you so much.